Welcome. You are listening to the Be a Better Being podcast hosted by Michelle Zellner and Sasha Berscheid. Michelle and Sasha are here to give you information and inspiration to help you live your healthiest, happiest lives. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the show.
Greetings, welcome Better Being. Thank you for listening to the Be a Better Being podcast. My name is Michelle Zellner, your host, and I am joined by my beautiful co-host, Sasha. How are you today, my friend?
Hello, I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for asking. How are you?
I am fantastic as well. I was thinking before we get too far down the road with all these fabulous conversations you and I are going to have and interviews that we're going to do, it might be helpful if the listeners had a little bit of our backstory so they can know us on a more personal level, so that when we have our hard conversations, they can maybe understand where we're coming from with those conversations.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that idea. It comes so naturally for you and I to just have this conversation and just pick up on where we left off. But what people don't know is like behind the curtains, behind the scenes. And it's not just like one layer, right? It's multiple layers back that actually laid the foundation to who we are. So I'm personally excited to take hold and navigate this conversation today, just so that everyone can see what an amazing person and foundation that you came from. Oh. So if you're cool with that, I would love to just kick this off. How about this? You tell me where you grew up.
Well, so I grew up in a very small town in rural Wisconsin, Winneconne. Shout out to all my Winneconne friends who I know are listening. Very small town. And I grew up in the outskirts, so in the country of this small town. I didn't even grow up in town. So even from kind of the beginning, I was an outsider, or I felt like I was on the outside of the crew, because I actually logistically was. But it was nice. I didn't know any different. Small town upbringing, that's all I knew. So you don't know what you're missing because this is your life. And we had, I want to say 100, little over 100 in our graduating class. And my parents are both from elsewhere. My dad grew up on a chicken farm in upstate New York. My mom is actually from the Netherlands, like fresh off the boat, Holland. She's Dutch through and through. And they met. My dad was in the Air Force and he was stationed over there, and they met. And lo and behold, my mom wanted to come to America, and here's this handsome GI. She's like, well, here's my ticket. It's kind of the joke, right? They are still madly in love at this recording 56 years later. So I guess it kind of all worked out.
It absolutely did. Tell them what it is that made you pop with passion when you were growing up.
Wow. This concept of passion and joy, those weren't things when I was growing up. You just lived life. You did your thing. Now, upon reflection, I know I was very passionate about gymnastics. That became obvious. Let's see, I think I was about 7, and our neighborhood had a couple of girls in my cohort, my very good friend Jessica, her sister, my sister, the 4 of us, her mom, Jessica's mom, decided we should all go to gymnastics lessons. Well, this was going to be a big investment of time because we lived, and this wasn't going to be in our small town, but in the big town of 50,000 people, which was about 30 minutes away. So she signed us up for gymnastics lessons Tuesday and Thursday nights from 6 to 7 p.m. And I was immediately struck. There was actually this other group working out on the other side of the gym. We worked out at the university facilities, UW Oshkosh, a Division III school. They had a very nice university facility for gymnastics. And so this kind of, introductory group practiced over here. There was this really cool group over here. And then there were some college groups working out as well. So there was literally everything from 6 to 22-year-olds, kind of all in the same space. But I was watching this group of people that some looked kind of my age, not that much older. It's like, I want to be with them. And the head of this big program at the time said, well, I don't know, they're really good, and you have to try out to be on that team. And I was like, okay. And so went through this kind of feeder program. And then in the summer, there were tryouts for this other team. And my friend Jessica tells the story that she went to Florida to see her grandma for the summer and came back, and I was doing flips and tricks and all of this stuff. And she was like, oh my gosh, like, how did this happen? And I'm the only one who stuck with it. It was truly for me, loved everything about it, and tried out for the team, made the team. That was like Christmas all over again, and learning I made the team. And that was really kind of the beginning of a very long process in my own childhood. And some things that came out of that definitely affected me throughout adulthood, and certainly have allowed me to grow and learn and share my journey going forward with people. Just things that I learned. I call them lessons from the mat. So yeah, gymnastics was certainly something I was very, very passionate about.
So we have lessons from the mat. What about lessons from the pat? What did your parents, what do you think would be, you like that one?
I love that one.
One lesson from your dad and one lesson from your mom that, if I know this is huge. There's so many lessons, and your parents are just, like you said, 56 years. So there's 56 years of combined lessons. But if you had to point one out from mom and one dad that says, this is one of my foundations, what would you say?
Well, I would say my mom is the risk taker. My mom and I, personality wise, are very, very similar. She's the risk taker. She, was always very positive. I can't say I was always very positive, but I think our nature is very similar. She doesn't tend to worry about things. She just kind of figures they're all going to work out. Very, very driven. My mom is the entrepreneur in our family, as am I, which that in itself is kind of a funny story later on. But yeah, I think the lesson from my mom is that you see something you want, you figure out how to get it. And she's very driven, but very kind and loving and supportive as well. My parents both let my sister and I choose our paths. I think that is huge. They didn't have this outline of what we should be, other than you do well in school. You are nice to each other. It's not an option to not get along with your sister. You work hard, and you live up to expectations, and that those are the expectations, that you work hard, you get along, you contribute to the family. You're a contributing member of this family in some way. And I think those are all really, really important life lessons that certainly have served me well going forward. Lessons from my dad, gosh, there's a picture, and it's probably going to make me cry. There's a picture of my dad on a lawnmower, and I don't know, maybe 2, but I'm sitting down on the floor of the lawnmower with him, just riding the lawnmower, getting to share that time. And so I think when I look back on kind of my relationship with my dad, it certainly has grown and evolved as I've gotten older. I wouldn't say I was super close with my dad. I was a little bit afraid of him. Just that little bit of healthy fear, because I didn't want to disappoint dad. I didn't want to let dad down. I didn't want to make dad mad, because there was discipline in our house. There were consequences for things. Now, it wasn't just out of the blue, random, for no reason. There were reasons. And at the time, of course, you feel like, well, I shouldn't have been disciplined. Yeah, I should have. And it's that discipline with love and kindness and the explanation of why and the consistency that I think helped mold both my sister and I into having a personal sense of responsibility in our own lives, but also understanding that we have to give ourselves a little bit grace, and there has to be that compassion along with it. So I look back at some of those moments with my dad that I truly cherish, because they were just the loving, gentle moments. And I think another really big lesson that I learned, and this was certainly both of them, but I think my dad is the one that facilitated this. Mom came first. The kids don't come first. And I've been through enough relationships where we're like, oh, the kids come first. I'm like, I don't know about that. Because I tell you what, mom came first in our house.
I will, just to interrupt, I will say this. I know for a fact that we will get some controversy on that, but I will chime in, and I will tell you this, that if you put your spouse first before the children, you are meant to have a very fruitful and long relationship, right? But the moment you start wedging something in between you two, so I think that's beautiful that was just an unspoken rule in your home.
Yeah, and I witnessed it. I mean, dad would come home from work and dad, and he would first put his briefcase down and give my mom a hug and a kiss before even acknowledging us. And you don't really think at the time what that all means and why. And I mean, he immediately then circled back to us, right? So it wasn't that he neglected us by any means. I mean, both of my parents, incredibly loving and supportive, lots of great guidance. And, all of us kind of went through our own different relationships with each other, as I think is totally natural. And it's honestly been really beautiful for me to get to know my parents on a different level once I became an adult, and I could see why they did things that they did and appreciate why they raised us the way they did. Because you don't understand that when you're going through childhood, and you think things aren't fair, and this is, everybody gets to do these and I have to do this, or they get this and I don't. And yet when you can look back and think, wow, I think my parents did a really great job, and I'm kind of proud to say that.
Yeah, I love hearing your story. I love just witnessing you. And when you go on vacations with your family, it's literally like a family vacation, even still to this day, which I think is beautiful and not that many people have. And it's something that I know you cherish, but I would be lying if I said that it's not something that riles that like small itty bitty jealousy, that little baby jealousy. But at the end of the day, it's like, I'm so happy that my friend gets to partake in such a healthy, wholesome family, you know?
Well, thank you. And I'm incredibly grateful for it, because I've been around enough and been with enough people and friends to recognize that what we have as a family is pretty rare. And when I get annoyed with things, I just remind myself, it's okay. I actually had a client many, many years ago. It was one of my first in-home personal training clients. And I was probably complaining about something my mom or dad said or did. I'm sure I was in my mid to late 20s at this point. And he had just lost his dad. And he said, Michelle, someday you're going to wish that you could hear them complain. And I think about that all the time. And he's right. I'm at that age where people are starting to lose their parents, and it's not, this is entering that phase of my life where it's gonna start to suck in a lot of ways, because a lot of friends are going to be in that situation, and eventually I'm going to be in that situation, and it's not going to be fun. I think that's the downside to having a super healthy, loving relationship with your family is when you lose them. I don't know that it's worse or not, but it's not going to be great, which is why I'm just hanging on and cherishing all the time between now and then.
There are a lot of cultures out there that they say the best way to deal with death and with grief is to talk about it ahead of time and to talk about it every day. That's something that my girlfriend Stacy and I, when we are on our trips, we take trips together every quarter, and every single day on our trips we talk about death and dying, just to alleviate it a little bit more, because the relationship she has with her father is the same relationship that you have with your father. It's just, they are two peas in a pod. They do everything together. And so I told her, the day that Denny dies is the day I'm not ready for either, because I know how much of a toll it's going to take on me, and I'm going to have to step up as that friend. So I love how close you are with your family, and the other member of your family that you're incredibly close to is your sister. If we were to put a cap on this whole thing and say, your sister contributed what for you being who you are today?
Wow. So my sister is older than me. She was first born and the beloved. It's true. There are literally thousands of pictures of my sister. There's maybe a handful of pictures of me. And that's all okay. So she's your classic type A, perfectionist, overachiever, literally valedictorian, captain of the cheerleader. Yes. Scholarships here and there, smartest person in the room, forging a career for herself. She's a pioneer, a female in a very male dominated world. So I'll say that growing up, we weren't very close. I mean, she was a lot more of a mother to me, and I found it to be annoying. And we've had these conversations. And so it was kind of like, just leave me alone and let me do my thing. We fought. Oh, it was ugly. Scratches, biting, hitting, just mean, just nasty. I remember our car trips. Oh gosh, my dad, girls, if I have to stop this car, that was the threat, because we'd be fighting in the back seat. And so we did not have a great relationship growing up. For whatever reason, we were very, very different. She had things going on in her own mind about what I was, and the nature of, what she perceived, like, oh, everybody likes Michelle better. Michelle's the youngest. Michelle gets everything she wants, which was so contrary to what I saw. And so there came a time where, and it honestly, I mean, the grand scheme of things, it wasn't that long ago. It was probably in the last maybe 10 years that we really came to a point where I realized we were either going to become good friends, or we were going to have a very divisive relationship and probably not have much of a relationship at all. And a lot of it just stemmed because we never had conversations. I was going through my stuff. She was going through her stuff. We didn't really talk about it. My sister is competitive. And so a lot of the things that she saw and did were through the lens of competition. I'm not competitive at all. And yet she was also very supportive. So in my gymnastics, she was my biggest cheerleader. And I didn't really know how to deal with that because I'm not competitive. So even though I was in competitive gymnastics, the competition didn't matter to me. In fact, if I didn't do well, I didn't care about me not doing well. I only cared that I just probably let my parents down and brought embarrassment to them and my sister. And so that was a whole different kind of dynamic that I didn't even know was really going on because I wasn't emotionally intelligent enough to know any of that. So yeah, as we both went through really difficult relationship breakups, which I guess if I go back now, that's probably more like 22 years ago. It was around Christmas time. Her significant relationship at that time had broken up with her. I had discovered my very first relationship that I was engaged to. We're going to get married, blah, blah, blah. I discovered in September of that year that he had a baby with somebody else while we were together. And this girl called me and just told me I should probably know that before I married him. So devastated, to say the least. So I had picked up my life, moved down to be with him in Texas. And now 3 months later, packed up everything and moved home to live with mom and dad in Wisconsin because I had no idea what I was going to do. Well, in the meantime, my parents had already planned Christmas in Hawaii for themselves because I was going to be with David, Nicole was going to be with, her significant other. And now here we are alone. So we went on the tour of misery. So we called it. We decided to go to one of the most glum places in the country in the winter, which is San Francisco. Rainy, cloudy, doomy, gloomy. We went to Alcatraz. We just saw all the doom and gloom and glum that we possibly could. And we were just miserable together, but in a really fun and funny way. And I think that experience right there was one of the biggest leaps forward that we took in our own relationships. There was also parts of that experience that kind of drove a wedge because I was navigating through my situation in a very different way from how she was navigating through hers. And that in itself kind of set off a couple things in her, which then reflected back towards me. So it was very interesting. And all of that, again, provided growth opportunities. And then fast forward another, 10 years, I guess, and me going through another really difficult time and relationship breakup and keeping everything very close to the vest on that while it was happening. And then the first time a lot of my family knew about it was when they read it in my book. That also kind of broke down some walls and opened some doors for conversation. And I think just going through all of that and my sister seeing more of who I am and what I've gone through and what I've done in response to what I've gone through has also maybe changed how she sees me. In fact, she will often have the conversation that, whenever she's struggling with something, she always says, well, WWMD, what would Michelle do? And I'm incredibly honored that she thinks that of me. But my sister to me is, I mean, she's fun, she's funny, she's quirky. She is the rocket scientist who is beautiful and funny and dresses sassy. You know, she's not maybe the stereotypical thing somebody would think of when they think of a scientist, right? And she really is all of those things. And I don't know, I am incredibly grateful. I definitely say she is in the top 5 of who I would call my best friend.
Incredible. I absolutely love that story. I'm incredibly close with both my sisters as well. And so when I see people that have siblings and are not doing anything to nurture that relationship, it hits me like, what are you doing? Like, your siblings are such a gift and such a blessing. But I do know that that's not the case for everyone. But I love when I meet other people who are close with their siblings as well.
Well, and it requires work, right? That's the thing, is it required both my sister and I to do hard work. There were things that I was doing that I didn't really know how it affected her until we had a conversation about it. And then I could have gotten defensive and said, well, that's too bad, that's who I am. Or I could have looked inward and said, yeah, she's right. And I don't like that. And I did my own hard work. And on the other side, she did hard work as well. So that's the thing, is one person might want to nurture a relationship with a sibling, but if the other party is not interested in that, or doesn't think they have anything to work on or any growth to be made, well, then it's not going to work. So it does take both parties being willing to accept and acknowledge and choose to grow forward together. And I mean, you and I both know, Sasha, that just in general, that's hard, right? And now you enter a family member and a family dynamic where maybe there's lots of past hurts and, pain, and you did this and that and whatever, that we have to unpack all of that to get to the starting point to move forward. And yeah, it's hard work. And in the midst of that, you also are trying to live your life, right? Do all the other things that life is throwing at you.
Yeah, we're going to say, we've said it so many times before, and we're going to say it multiple times again, just to remind you guys, but if you want anything, it's going to take work. And most of the time it's going to take hard work. If you're looking at being healthy, if you're looking at nurturing a relationship, if you are looking at going to school, if you're looking to become a professional athlete, whatever it is, it takes work. Yes, there are a lot of people out there with talents that have been given to them by God, right? But that's not enough to get to the next level where most people want to go.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I think so. That's enough about me. I want to hear about you. I know there's more about my history, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, in other episodes. One thing, I'll just give a little teaser. I know I'm a very outgoing, confident person now. That was not the case, like, at all. I was a lemming. I was a sheep. I was a follower. I had no confidence. So my whole dynamic of growth into the confident person I am today, and have been for quite some time, I didn't start out that way. And maybe we'll unpack that in another conversation. But I want to know, and I know everybody else wants to know, like, what's your story? Where did Sasha come from, and how did she grow into who she is today?
Sure. So my dad is from Lincoln, Nebraska. He is just your average, typical American dude. My mom moved from El Salvador at the age of, she was in her 20s. I always forget. I know I've asked them several times, both of them, to actually write up their little narrative. But my mom first moved from El Salvador to San Francisco, from San Francisco to South Dakota, from South Dakota to Lincoln. And my mom and dad met at a party in Lincoln. They got married. She was 27, he was 31. I was born when she was 28. So I think they dated 26, 27. I was born at 28. I had a very diverse childhood. I would spend half of my year in the States and then the other half of my year in El Salvador. So to be honest, Spanish is my first language. I don't speak it often anymore. I'm very intimidated, and because I don't practice, I'm not confident in it, even though when I was drinking, so in my drinking days, I thought I was so good at Spanish, and so I would practice it all the time, but that Sasha doesn't exist anymore. So let's see, I went to preschool in El Salvador. I moved back to the States, went to kindergarten through ninth grade at a Seventh-day Adventist private school. My first English word that I ever learned was duck. And I remember getting made fun of it. And I said duke. And it was by my cousins. I just remember so many things about learning languages and being so intimidated by so many people, and just never breaking out of my shell. And I do believe that that's why I lean so heavily on alcohol, because it did give me the confidence to break out of my shell, and I felt sexy and I felt cool and confident and all those things. Now that I'm sober, I still feel cool and confident. I don't feel sexy anymore, which is funny. That drinking gave me that ba ba boom, and now I'm just me. I don't have that sex appeal in my own skin that I did back when in my drinking days. In ninth grade, so starting when I was 3, my dad put me in soccer. I played soccer until I was 21. The first time I ever played on a co-ed team was at the age of 6. They put me on a co-ed team. By the age of 11, I was trying out for an all boys team, a select club soccer team. So I made CSA gold from the age of 12 until 16. At the age of 16, I tried out for a girls team that was my age. So it would have been U16 at the time. The girls didn't like me. The parents didn't like me. And it was all politics. And even though I killed it at tryouts, like I did incredible, it was probably one of the best tryouts I had ever done in my life. The parents said, we don't want her on the team. And so the coach had to call me and say, hey, unfortunately, we can't take you on the team, but you can play up a year. The team that I played up a year with they had some great athletes, but none of the athletes wanted to go to college. So that specific club team never went to like showcases. The team that I wanted to be on was very dedicated to trying to get every player into a Division I team. So it was just constantly like, I never felt good enough for where I wanted to be. I knew where I wanted to be, but I was on a boys team. I thought I was already better than myself. The parents didn't want to deal with me. The girls didn't want to deal with me. So I didn't get to be on that team, and I had to be on this team. And this team was fantastic. But I didn't get as many eyes on me on this team than this team. I did get scouted to play at several colleges when I was 16/17. I graduated high school at 17. I started college at 17. I couldn't even sign any of my paperwork for my Division I soccer team. My parents had to do all of it. And back then it wasn't easy like email, it was faxing. So I had to sit through all of these like, okay, and now we have to fax this over. And my dad was on the line because they'd have to tell my dad what was on the paper and me in the paper. It was just a hot mess. But I did end up, out of all the schools that scouted me, I could have gone to Creighton, I could have gone to Nebraska. I actually picked the one furthest away from my home. I decided to travel and start at Lipscomb University, a really small Division I school out of Nashville, Tennessee. And really, my household, my parents, my sisters, me, we revolved around soccer. So that was my foundation, everything from the weekends to how much my dad worked to how much my mom worked, even our vacations. When I went to El Salvador, I was playing on an all men's soccer school. There was 500 boys around me, and then there was just me. That school was called La Chelona, and it was my life. It was my passion. It was the only thing I knew, like literally the only thing I knew. I knew so many people, but it was all because of soccer. Additionally, when I was, in 10th grade, I moved out of the private school that I went to public school so that I could pursue soccer. because the private school that I went to did not offer it. And I think that was a blessing moving from the private school to the public school, because that's when I decided that I was going to be confident and I was going to become my me. Like, I decided I'm going to go to this new school and I'm going to be cool and I'm going to be hot and I'm going to be popular, or try to be. And I think that that really allowed me to reset some of myself, even though I was so young at 10th grade. Now, I'm not saying I reset myself in healthy ways, but I did get to have a chance at saying, this is who I want to be. And then I realized that in life, you can do that at any time. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a huge transition. It can be just a blink of the eye, say, I don't want to do this anymore. This isn't me. This doesn't feel right. And the first time I ever got to do that was in high school, transitioning from a private school where it was volatile for me, because they were telling me all these rules and regulations that I had to do in order to live my life successfully, be a good Christian. And that's not how it worked for me. That's not how it worked for me and God. Like, that just didn't. So I'm really glad that my parents allowed me to leave private school and go to public school. But honestly, all I can think about when I think about my foundation, when I think about my childhood, when I think about lessons that I learned, it was always revolved around soccer, every single thing.
So let's go back a little bit and talk about your family dynamic. You mentioned, so obviously your mom came from El Salvador. How did a Nebraska boy and a woman from El Salvador even meet? And you have two sisters, yes?
Yes, I have two.
So, yeah, tell us a little bit about the relationships, and kind of how did they all play soccer? Like, what did that do? Just that intense focus on you and that one thing. How did that impact everybody else, and kind of, where that leaves relationships, and your just how time and energy was divided with three kids, and maybe one being so focused on this really time intensive passion.
Yeah. So my mom was in San Francisco because she had some friends from her high school who had moved there. And so she wanted to move there. She knew someone there. Her sister then continued her venture and went to a private college, Mount something like that, in South Dakota. So my mom followed. And then my tia Emma, so tia is aunt in Spanish, but my tia Emma moved from Central America. She fled her home when she was 13. She was to be sold as a child bride and ran away from home. And that was my grandma's sister. And she decided that she was going to do whatever it took to have a life. When she was running away from home, she found a couple of missionaries who decided to adopt her. And they put her through the schooling system, and then they just fell in love with her and brought her up to the States. And my tia Emma went to college. She was a student, or she was a teacher for elementary students, and she lived in Lincoln, Nebraska. So my mom, when she moved to South Dakota, then decided that it was going to be best for her to move to Lincoln to be next to tia Emma. My mom's entire family stayed in El Salvador. Like, her mom, her dad, her brothers and sisters all stayed down there for quite some time. Eventually, everyone moved out with the exception of one aunt, one uncle, and my grandparents. Everyone else moved to America. But my tia Emma was probably the biggest asset outside of my mother and father for me growing up. My tia Emma taught me about vegetables. She taught me about, she never drove a car. She walked everywhere. She took she just took a bus everywhere. She was the most humble, most incredible, caring, loving woman I've ever met in my life. She is the reason I am the way I am today, 100%. I know that she was a guardian angel that helped me get sober. that relationship means the most to me out of anyone that I've ever had in my life. You know, when they say, if you could meet anyone or have lunch with anyone, who would you pick? And people are like, Abraham Lincoln or whatever. I would, without a doubt, I would do anything to see her again. So she was really there for me. She was really there for my dad, and she was really there for my mom. You know what? Just thinking about her, there wasn't a person on the face of this earth that she wasn't there for. And I think that that's why I try to do that, because I know that that's what she would do. If a person could be complete stranger, could be someone robbing her, knocked on her front door. And in fact, someone did rob her. That's why we don't have any of her assets now, but knock on her door and said, I need help. She would just say, take what you need. Like, this isn't mine. You can have whatever you need. My mom and dad had me when they were relatively young. And then my mother and my father tried multiple times to have more siblings for me, but it took about 9 and then 11 years for that to come into fruition. So Samantha is 9 years younger than me. Sammy is incredibly intelligent. She is incredibly educated. She's resilient. She has graduated from Johns Hopkins with her master's. She had worked for Harvard. She had worked for some of the biggest science blah blah blahs in Switzerland. She's just got a brain on her, and she is a very safe landing place for me. And then Sabrina, who is 11 years younger than me, is absolutely resilient, is incredibly feisty and fiery and a firecracker. And Sammy graduated from college as valedictorian. She did the commencement speech for her school and everything. She's competitive, just like your sister. She's just a very well-rounded kid. Sabrina is nurturing, kind, patient, loving, caring, charismatic, beautiful, stunning. I mean, like, if you could say Mrs. America or Miss America, it'd be Sabrina. Sabrina has compassion unlike anyone I've ever met. It could be from a frog to an elder person. She would find a way to help anything and anyone thrive. So when Sabrina took a step back and she said, what do I want to do with my life? She said, I want to be like Tia Emma. And so she went ahead and started her adventure in elementary education as well. And my grandma, my Tia Emma, her sister, Mama Tila, okay, she was also in education. So I don't want to take anything away from any of my other relatives, because they were all very influential in my life. It just was difficult to be easily influenced from thousands and thousands of miles away. So although my dad's parents were fantastic, my mom's parents were fantastic, the person who takes the cake in my world, in my life, and the reason I am the way I am, hands down, is my Tia Emma. And I know she influenced a lot of people, including both my sisters, to continue being this way. I mean, she influenced my mom to be able to be like, okay, you can do this, you can move, tough things happen, hard things happen. But if you want something to change, you have to change. Nothing changes if nothing changes. So she could have just been a child bride at the age of 13 and gone down the same steps as all of her generations and gotten married and had babies and had babies and had babies. And she never got married. She never had children. She was called to be a missionary of the earth, not just necessarily like, oh, I need to go to Guatemala to be a missionary. No, she took it upon herself to make her city her own mission trip.
Well, it's so beautiful that a member of your extended family is really who you say is probably the biggest influencer. I have to say, coming from a very small family, I was always jealous of people who had grandmas and aunts. My dad has a small family. He has an older sister and a younger sister. My mom was basically an only child and in Europe, and her parents passed away when I was 5. So very fond memories of going to Holland, a couple times and then coming to visit us. But when you lose your grandparents at 5, you don't have a lot of memories or relationship. Mm-hmm. My dad's parents, They didn't really like us. Let me just put it that way. My sister and I, we could do nothing right. So it wasn't this loving kind of grandma, grandpa relationship that people all, I think, hope for and many get to have. And because they were in New York and we were in Wisconsin, even, the aunts, the uncles, the cousins, we didn't have a lot of interaction. So I was always a little bit jealous of my friends who had their family close and going to the holidays with all these big family gatherings and aunts and cousins and all this great stuff. And, for you, even though they were distant and far away, still to have that one really powerful influence and support, and obviously a huge role model for you and somebody that you now emulate, that's pretty special.
I'm very thankful that I had such a diverse upbringing, right? Like I can, I will get permission from my mom to talk about some of the racism that I have had to see. I personally haven't, I don't want to say I haven't experienced racism firsthand, but I have experienced it secondhand because I've watched it happen to my mom over and over again. But I just think it's so incredible how I was gifted so many cultures, the Hispanic culture, the American culture, and everything in between, and just being able to learn how to live in diversity and live an inclusive life. And yeah, hands down, so thankful for all of my mom's side of the family, my dad's side of the family, and then just both my parents doing whatever it took to work for for our family network to be able to experience, like my dad worked hard for us and my mom worked hard for us to be able to fly to El Salvador every December to see her entire family. My dad is so fascinated by the Hispanic culture that he bought a house down in El Salvador. He would drive from Nebraska all the way to El Salvador so that we would have a car down there. Like it's engulfed in his blood. And I'm very thankful for that too, because there was never like a shame associated. There wasn't ever like, oh, I'm Hispanic. It was always like, heck yeah, this is awesome. I love my culture. So I'm very proud of that as well, that my parents taught me how to embrace who I am and where I come from.
Well, I love that. And I have to say that is one of my biggest regrets. My mom is Dutch and she would speak Dutch and she was the foreign one in a very small town. So there were times where I got made fun of because of my mom's accent. And she would talk Dutch to us around my friends. And I would get really upset. Mom, we're in America, speak English. And so she did. And I am the one person in the family who doesn't speak Dutch. And, I came to regret that not quite some time ago, that I didn't embrace the uniqueness, right? And rather wanted to quiet my mom to be like everybody else so that you don't put a spotlight on me and, make people make fun of me. And it's so interesting in retrospect how, the uniqueness and the individuality is what I embrace about everybody. And yet I was the first one to try to shut it down in my mom. And that is something I've had conversations with over a long, long period of time. And certainly it's a regret of mine. So I love hearing that, your circumstance with that was very different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think both, even just regretting it or even embracing it, right? It added to our foundation.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Every single thing that happens in our life, right? The story doesn't just start at college or start with this one big event. Everybody's story starts the minute, even maybe before you come out of that womb. There are so many pieces that have come into play to create who we are and mold who we are and shape who we are, all the different influences. You had your aunt. I would say my gymnastic coaches were as big of influences in my life as my parents. There was a very significant period of time where I spent more time with my gymnastics coaches than I spent with my parents. Mm-hmm. So, for anybody listening, whatever your family situation is, your family dynamic, who's there, who's not there, what the relationships are, family can look a lot of different ways, and how we find influence and support and guidance I think really does require each of us to be open to receiving it and to recognizing where it's coming from and how that is going to help mold and shape, and maybe somebody to model after, someone to emulate, someone to learn from, and recognize that maybe I'm not getting it from the people I think I should be getting it from, but am I getting positive influences from somewhere? That's really what matters. A lot of times it doesn't matter exactly who it's from. It's that you have it from somewhere. But if we do have, tenuous relationships with anybody, a sibling, a parent, an extended family member, a cousin, whoever, first look at yourself. What am I doing? What is my role in why there's this tension, incongruity, whatever? And then decide, is this relationship worth you maybe going out on a limb, you doing extra work, and then recognizing you can't make somebody do something, right? So it's going to be up to them as well. And wherever you are in your age and your journey of life and these relationships we have with different people, know that they can change, good or bad, they can change. And it's about how we maybe navigate through all the different situations we go through that's going to impact what that ends up being for the long run. And so, when you go through challenges with anybody, just keep that in mind, that everything is fleeting. Some things take a little longer than others, but if you look in the mirror and you know that you showed up and you did the best you could with the information you have, with the capabilities you have, and maybe that they did the best they could with what they had at the time, that's, another part of this, I think, this process of getting to a healthy place with relationships too.
Absolutely. I agree. When I first started dating Andrew, and I'll leave you guys with this, he gave me this beautiful story, picture, piece of advice, however you want to coin it. But I was having difficulties with digesting situations. And he just said, dude, Sasha, stop, take a look at your side of the street. Now, every person has their own side of the street. They all have their own front lawn. They all have their own mailboxes. They all have their picket fence, or maybe not a fence. Maybe they have tulips. Maybe some people have rose bushes. Who cares what other people have? You have no control of their side of the street. You can't go over there and pick up the trash if maybe they have just a whole bunch of debris all over. Maybe they're not mowing, maybe they're not fertilizing, or maybe they have the most immaculate lawn in the world because they're taking such good care of their street or their side of the street, right? But it doesn't matter. What you need to focus on, Sasha, is just taking care of your side of the street, making sure that your side of the street is cleaned up, making sure your side of the street is being manicured and fertilized and loved on and sunshine and what have you. And that has helped me so much with all of my relationships, whether it be actual like family relationship, kin, or professional, right? Making sure that whatever I'm doing, I'm taking care of my side of the street. Do I need to apologize for what has happened on my side of the street? Do I need to take accountability and accept my actions for what I have done? Do I need to mend my fence? Do I need to water my grass? Whatever that looks like, doing it from my side of the street and just saying what you had said in the press, in the last or in one of our podcasts, is meeting these people and knowing that they're doing the best that they can given their circumstance. So knowing that that person is taking care and nurturing their side of the street as best as they can, and doing the same for myself. And then as long as I'm taking care of my side of the street, who cares? Who cares how much trash a person has collected, or if they are or not recycling? As long as I'm doing what it takes to be the best that I can be in any relationship and circumstance, and I'm showing up for myself, then that means I can show up for someone else.
I love that. Yes. It's something Andrew and I don't know, we must have some telepathic synergies going on, because I often say, keep your side of the sidewalk clean. That's it, right?
Yeah.
If you want to go clean somebody else's sidewalk, knock it out, but don't expect anything in return. Do that because you choose to do that. And that might be a whole other conversation for a podcast that we have at some point. But I think this is good. I think it's a good place to wrap up. People know a little more about where I come from, a little more about where you come from. Obviously, there is much, 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 much more to both of our stories, but we can't tell everything all at once. So let's leave it at that. Any other closing thoughts before we officially close out?
Work on starting to set your boundaries on your side of the street. Recognize where your street ends, and recognize what does it take to nurture and to clean up and to provide all the things to make your side of the street yours. Own
Beautiful.
it.
Beautiful. I love it, my friend. Always great chatting with you.
Yes.
Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, we encourage you to do anything you can to be a better being. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Be a Better Being podcast. Michelle and Sasha hope that what you heard today inspires you to embrace this journey of life with an open mind, a kind heart, and a willingness to learn and evolve. If you enjoyed the content, please help spread their message by subscribing, sharing, and leaving a 5-star review. If you have a show topic idea or would like to be a guest, please visit betterbeings.net and fill out a contact form. Until next time, go and be a better being.